Hi, you guys, and welcome to chapter 27. This is quite a jump here from 18, and we're looking at circulatory and respiratory systems. So we're going to start out with blood, and blood has diverse functions, but the one that first comes to mind is the carrying of dissolved respiratory gases through the body. So you are transporting oxygen and picking up carbon dioxide. The heart is going to pump through vessels, and this is kind of what ours looks like, our system looks like, where you have the right side of the heart has deoxygenated blood, and it's in blue, and it's traveling all the way to the lung. And it's picking up, let's get my pen back. Color red. So we're going to make this the lung up here, and then it's going to load up with oxygen and bring it to the left side of the heart. And the function of that left side of the heart is to pump it to the rest of the body. Once that has pumped to the rest of the body and distributed oxygen, then this deoxygenated blood comes back to the right side of the heart and it pumps back to the lung. From the lung back to the left side, and it keeps doing this little loop like this throughout the body. I wanted to alert you that the word vessels here means all of these. It could be an artery, it could be a little artery, which is an arteriole. It could be a capillary, it could be a vein, it could be a little vein, which is a venule. So all of these are considered vessels. So that's a generic word that we use. Okay. This is a picture of the composition of blood. If you were to take a test tube, fill it up with blood, and put it in a centrifuge machine and spin it around as fast as you can, it's going to settle out all the particles that are in that sample. And so this is going to settle out what? This is where the settling is happening, and this is where all the cells are going to be, and little fragments of cells. And what's left up at the top here is the plasma, which is very transparent, watery-like substance, and it truly is watery. Look at the composition here of that plasma. It's mostly water, and it has some proteins and some salts and hormones and gases, but the majority here is water and proteins, and down below are red blood cells, white blood cells, very few, 0.1%, and platelets, which are the cells that are going to help clotting, and put clot here. Okay, so if any of you have had a test for anemia, what they'll do then is take a very tiny sample, just a couple of drops of blood, put it in a tiny little pipette, and they will centrifuge it and then measure this and see whether truly you have 45% here of cells, and therefore you have enough red blood cells that are distributing that oxygen, or if you're slightly low in that number. And there's various reasons for why that could potentially be low. Okay, let's look at one red blood cell, this humongous one here. It contains, I'm telling you, 250 million hemoglobin molecules. So this cool hemoglobin molecule has huge affinity for oxygen, meaning it's attracted to the oxygen. And it's a transporter. It's an oxygen taxi. So it's able to pick up oxygen in the lung and then transport it. It's going to be transported through the blood and distributed to other cells. So think of those 250 million hemoglobin molecules in one red blood cell. And each one of these hemoglobin molecules is able to transport 4 oxygen molecules. So 1, 2 in blue here, 3 and 4. So 4 oxygen molecules on 1 hemoglobin in a red blood cell, but we have 250 million hemoglobin molecules, making it 1 billion oxygen molecules that can be transported by 1 red blood cell. That is gigantic. There you are, 1 billion of them. And that's just 1 red blood cell. So a drop has millions of red blood cells. 5 million cells in a cubic millimeter. So I put it in red there what a cubic millimeter is. You'd have 5 million of those, each one of those with a billion oxygen molecules as it transports. It's crazy. Very good system. So lots of oxygen can be transported in those 5 liters of blood that we have. That's an average. Each one of us have about 5 liters of blood. Okay, those are red blood cells. What about white blood cells? Well, we have 5 different kinds of white blood cells. These are part of your immune system. They're able to attack microbes. They're able to attack bacteria or cells, bacteria that are infected with a virus. And these are they. So there is a mnemonic to remember the names of these in order of most prevalent to least prevalent. And that would be N for never let monkeys eat bananas. That will help you remember the most important ones are the most prevalent neutrophils and lymphocytes. Less common for these. Eosinophils show up in allergies. If you've got a lot of allergies, you probably have a lot of eosinophils when that's happening. So with these 5 cells, slightly different functions, but they're all part of your immune system. So white blood cells, red blood cells, and now platelets. 4.8% of your cells are platelets, and their sole function is to clot in the event that you were to have some unwanted bleeding. So this is a person here shaving, and let's say they cut themselves. So this would be the vessel, and in comes the blade, and it's just damaged the tissue here. So this tissue is able to release a chemical, a paracrine, that is going to alert these cells, these platelets, that they're to become sticky and they're to stick to each other. And before that, notice they were on their own here and they were not sticky. Here they form a big sticky mess and they stop the bleeding. This is a tricky thing because in your body you don't want them to become sticky when you don't have bleeding, because you could potentially get a clot in the brain or a clot in the heart, in the coronary arteries, could be fatal. So you want this to happen only and only when there is tissue damage. And then this is showing the tissue damage fixed up. And if you were to look at it under a really nice microscope, you would see that those red blood cells are trapped in these non-soluble strands of fibrin. So it forms a little network, a little net that's going to stop that bleeding. Pretty cool. Some of the functions of blood: gas exchange, we've been saying, distribute oxygen, pick up CO2, nutrient transport, so it's going to bring glucose to different parts of the body. Waste, it's going to pick up urea and transport it over to the kidney and you'll be able to eliminate it. Transport hormones, maybe from the brain to other parts of the body. It forms also the interstitial fluid. What's that mean? So if you were to have a cell and another cell right next to it, and let's say these are all skin cells, they're sitting there, the fluid that surrounds these cells is a tiny bit of fluid that's in this region here. That is interstitial fluid. It's not dry on the outside of your cells. So blood is going to sort of leak a little bit of that plasma and create that fluid that surrounds cells. And the last one is just protection, given that it has the molecules that are part of your immune system traveling around attached onto white blood cells. Let's look at some animal circulatory systems, because these animals do have a circulatory system, a worm and a grasshopper, and they look quite different to what yours would look like. So in the arthropods and in the mollusks, they have an open circulatory system. So what's that mean? It means that they have something that looks kind of like a heart, and it's a muscle, and it's able to pump this fluid, not always called blood, And it's open on this end, so it kind of bathes the inside of this organism. And it flows all over here, so this would flow, and then it gets picked up on the other end. It gets picked up here and comes, distributes it, flows around, and then it gets picked up on the other end here, and that would be an open circulatory system. Vertebrates have a closed circulatory system, in which case there's a heart. It may have different numbers of chambers, and it pumps in one direction and then never leaves this tubing and comes back to the heart. That's how ours is. So it never leaves vessels. It doesn't just flow out freely into your abdomen. So these are closed circulatory systems. And in this worm here, annelid also has a closed circulatory system that actually can irrigate the whole long worm. Now, numbers of heart chambers, this varies. So if you were to look at fish and larval amphibians, so a tadpole, you'd see that they only have 2 chambers. So atrium and a ventricle, and it pumps past these, gets to the gills, fills up with oxygen, distributes to all those cells in the body, and then comes back to that little pump. So it's like pump, pick up at the gills, go everywhere else. Pump, pick up at the gills, go everywhere else. Always the blue is the blood low in oxygen, and the red is the one that is oxygenated. In birds and mammals, we have that figure 8 where it arrives. It's kind of like 2 pumps, right? You could kind of make a line like this. And you could say this pump on the right, this is the right, by the way, because you have to imagine that individual facing you. So look at someone that's facing you. It's their right, not your right. So this right side is a pump that does one thing. It pumps to the lung and then returns it. And so the left side is a separate pump. These don't mix. That blood doesn't mix in here. It has to go all the way around and then get to the other side. And this left side's job is to pump to the rest of the body. So 2 sort of separate functions. We're going to stop this here and then move on to part 2 of this chapter 27. Thanks for listening.